Skyrim is one of those rare games that feels alive even when you're standing still. The world keeps breathing around you, no matter where you are. What makes it so special isn't just its mountains or dungeons, but the way everything quietly fits together, as if the land itself remembers you're there. Even after more than a decade, players still discover details hidden in the snow. When Skyrim released in the year 2011, it was one of the most ambitious open worlds ever built. Bethesda's team spent nearly 5 years shaping it, layering detail after detail until every cabin, cave, and city had its own rhythm. At one point, more than 100 different voice actors recorded over 60,000 lines of dialogue. That's why even the smallest towns feel alive. Every guard, merchant, and traveler has something to say, even if it's just a passing thought about the weather. One of the quietest details most players miss is how the wind changes. In snowy areas, it howls with a deep echo, but in the forests, it softens into a whisper. Bethesda recorded different environmental sounds for nearly every biome. If you stand still long enough, you'll notice that caves have their own echoes. Waterfalls hum differently at night, and towns grow quieter after sunset. The sound of Skyrim isn't just music, it's the landscape itself speaking. The game's most famous mountain, the Throat of the World, was modeled after several real mountain ranges, including the Rockies and parts of the Swiss Alps. It stands as the highest point in the Elder Scrolls universe, and you can actually climb to the very top without fast traveling. It just takes patience and a few careful jumps. If you reach the summit, you'll find a small offering placed there, a notched pickaxe, a playful nod to the creator of Minecraft. That's one of Skyrim's many hidden winks to the real world. Skyrim's world is vast, but what makes it feel alive are the small systems working underneath. Every character has a schedule. Merchants wake up and open their shops. Farmers rise with the sun and tend their fields. Guards change shifts as the sky fades. Even the wild animals have their own routines. Wolves travel in pairs, deer flee toward water, and foxes can lead you to treasure if you're patient enough to follow them. It's not scripted, it's simulated. The world moves. Even when you're not watching, the developers gave the dragons their own kind of intelligence too. Each dragon has a personality coded into its behavior. Some prefer to fly in circles and shout from above, while others land quickly and fight on the ground. They'll attack giants, bandits, or other dragons if the timing is right. It's one of the reasons no two battles ever feel the same. The dragons aren't bosses, they're part of the ecosystem. One of the most iconic sounds in gaming came from Skyrim's theme, Dragonborn. It was recorded using a choir of over 30 voices singing in a made-up dragon language. Those 30 voices were then layered 3 times, creating the sound of over 90 warriors chanting in unison. The language itself was constructed just for the game, with grammar, syntax, and pronunciation rules. It's the reason those words, Fus Ro Da, feel powerful even if you've never studied what they mean. In early builds of the game, the weather system was even more complex. Bethesda experimented with dynamic blizzards that could bury objects in real snow, but it proved too demanding for the hardware at the time. Some of those effects were later reused for the snowy storms seen in special editions. Even now, you can feel the way weather shifts naturally, a mist rolling in near a river, snow thickening as you climb, or a sudden flash of lightning that momentarily paints the world in white. The guards of Skyrim are some of the most quoted characters in video game history. The line about taking an arrow to the knee became an internet legend almost overnight. But the phrase actually means getting married in Old Nordic slang. So when guards mention taking an arrow to the knee, they're not always talking about injury. Sometimes they're talking about settling down. The humor of Skyrim lies in those double meanings. where every throwaway line can reveal something deeper about the world. Many of Skyrim's cities are built directly on the ruins of older civilizations. Whiterun, for instance, was designed around the idea of a longhouse, a tribute to Norse hall architecture, while Markarth was carved into the remnants of Dwemer stonework. The Dwemer ruins throughout the game aren't just set pieces. They're carefully placed to create a feeling of age layered beneath the surface. If you stand in Markarth's market and look closely at the walls, you can see the difference. The old Dwemer metal meeting the new wood and brick of human design. It's a city literally built on another's bones. Bethesda wanted players to feel like explorers, not tourists. That's why so many dungeons are hidden behind small paths or half-collapsed tunnels. Some caves contain entire stories without a single line of dialogue, a skeleton holding a sword beside a journal, or a trap that clearly took its last victim by surprise. The team called this environmental storytelling, and it became one of Skyrim's most enduring trademarks. The game also hides plenty of developer humor. One secret location, known as the test cell, exists outside the map, an invisible room filled with nearly every item in the game. It's where developers checked how objects looked and behaved before release. Players who manage to glitch into it can find hundreds of items scattered across the ground, from cheese wheels to dragon bones, all floating in a void. It's the kind of odd digital space that feels almost mystical, a hidden backstage behind the world's illusion. Even the music reacts to your journey. The composer, Jeremy Sewell, wrote nearly 4 hours of original music, most of it designed to blend seamlessly. The melodies shift subtly when you leave a town, climb a mountain, or enter combat. He described it as music that breathes with the player. It never demands attention, but it always fills the silence. It's one of the reasons Skyrim feels so timeless. The soundtrack has no beginning or end, only moments that rise and fade like wind through pine trees. When players discovered that you could put a bucket over a shopkeeper's head to steal without being seen, Bethesda didn't patch it immediately. The team reportedly laughed and let the glitch become part of Skyrim's charm. It's a perfect example of how the game's systems are both complex and wonderfully imperfect. The world reacts logically, but sometimes logic is the funniest thing of all. Even the smallest creatures have their purpose. Bees can be caught, fish can be harvested, and butterflies react to your movements. At one point during development, the team had to remove a bug where butterflies would cause chain reactions in the physics engine, bumping into objects and knocking over entire tables of food. They fixed it, but the butterflies stayed, becoming one of Skyrim's most peaceful details. You can spend an entire evening chasing them through sunlit forests, the world glowing gold around you. And that's what makes Skyrim feel eternal. It's not the quests, or the dragons, or the battles that linger. It's the quiet moments, the sound of a stream running beneath a wooden bridge, the way torches flicker on a stone wall, the music that rises as the sun sets. Skyrim was never just a place to conquer. It was, and still is, a place to rest. Skyrim's magic isn't just in its spells or dragons. It's in the small, invisible rules that hold the world together. Beneath every hill and ruin is a network of unseen logic guiding everything you see. The game's Radiant AI system allows characters to make decisions even when you're not there. If you drop a weapon in a town, a nearby guard might pick it up and return it. If you steal something, a child might run to tell someone. These tiny interactions create the illusion of life, a world that remembers what you do. Many players never realize that merchants have personal inventories stored in invisible chests hidden below the map. When you buy or sell, the game quietly interacts with those unseen containers. It's one of the reasons certain exploits exist. Clever adventurers found ways to reach those chests and take everything. Bethesda left them untouched in later versions, almost as if acknowledging that curiosity is part of Skyrim's design. The world's books are more than decoration. There are over 800 readable books, each with their own short story, essay, or spell. Some are reprints from earlier Elder Scrolls games, connecting Skyrim to its older worlds. Others are entirely new, written by a team of in-house writers who treated them like forgotten fragments of history. One book even contains a simple poem about snowflakes, a rare moment of peace among endless conflict. The reason Skyrim's mountains feel natural is because they were hand-sculpted, not procedurally generated. Artists shaped every peak and cliff by hand, adjusting angles to catch sunlight and shadow correctly. When fog rolls across the range at dawn, it's not random weather. It's timed lighting interacting with the terrain's exact curves. Bethesda's environmental team spent months adjusting how snow particles fell across surfaces, so when you stand on a ridge, it looks like a storm breathing across the horizon. Some of the most iconic sound effects in Skyrim were created from everyday objects. The sound of a dragon's roar came partly from slowed-down recordings of a horse mixed with metal scraping on stone. The noise of a fire spell igniting was made by striking a microphone with a heated wire. Even the sound of footsteps on snow came from the designer walking on cornstarch. Every noise, from a swinging sword to a closing door, was chosen for texture as much as realism. If you've ever noticed that enemies sometimes miss their first arrow on purpose, that's intentional. Bethesda programmed early attacks to aim slightly off target, giving players a moment to react. It was meant to make the world feel fair, to create the sense that combat was tense but never cruel. Those tiny touches of mercy help keep Skyrim balanced between challenge and calm. The stars in Skyrim's sky are not random either. The constellations match the Elder Scrolls in-universe zodiac, representing the signs used for character creation in previous games. If you look carefully, the thief, the mage, and the warrior form a triangle visible from almost anywhere in the world. The designers wanted even the night sky to feel like a continuation of history, something old and familiar quietly watching over you. Skyrim's rivers and waterfalls were also designed by hand. Each current was given direction and strength to control how fish swim and how water sounds in different regions. Near the city of Riften, the water is calmer to fit the town's wooden architecture, while in the north, near Winterhold, the rivers grow harsh and jagged. It's an invisible design language that matches tone with geography. During testing, developers realized dragons could accidentally pick up goats in their claws while attacking villages. It was never planned, but the moment was so absurd that they decided to leave the physics intact. It's part of Skyrim's charm, a world full of accidents that somehow feel intentional. The unexpected becomes believable because it happens within a system that allows chaos to exist gracefully. When you read letters or notes in Skyrim, they're often written in a real in-game font based on runic calligraphy. The writing was designed to look ancient but still readable. Each letter was crafted to feel like it came from a civilization halfway between medieval and myth. Even junk mail from bandits or noble families carries the same care. Every piece of paper is treated as part of the world's texture, not just its story. The team used over 10,000 hand-placed lighting sources throughout Skyrim. Candles flicker because their animations are tied to wind strength. Torches burn shorter in storms. Some windows glow only at certain hours of the night, synchronized with the invisible lives of the people inside. If you travel at dusk, you can sometimes see a village begin to light up one building at a time, like the world quietly preparing for sleep. When you find random encounters on the road, A thief demanding gold, a hunter chasing a deer, a lost dog waiting for its master. Those are part of the game's radiant story system. It selects events based on where you are, what you've done, and even what you're carrying. The goal was to make every playthrough feel unique, as if the world was telling its own story through you. Some encounters are so rare that even players with hundreds of hours may never see them. In the game's files, there are unused lines of dialogue for a talking mud crab. It was part of an early joke quest that never made it into the final version, though many fans later imagined it as the origin of the mud crab merchant rumor. Bethesda often hides these odd fragments in their games, little digital fossils from ideas that didn't survive but still left an imprint. The loading screen tips that appear between locations are generated from a library of over 200 lines. Some are factual, others are slightly philosophical. The developers intentionally made some vague or poetic, knowing that players would read them hundreds of times. Over the years, those small messages became part of Skyrim's rhythm, moments of breath between movement, where the world pauses to think with you. Even the dragons' names follow a pattern. Each one can be translated using the game's constructed language. Their titles describe their nature: fire, storm, hunger, frost. One dragon's name means devourer of hope, another's means keeper of silence. These meanings are hidden in plain sight, waiting for those curious enough to decode them. It's one more layer of mystery inside a world already overflowing with secrets. The reason so many players feel at peace in Skyrim's wilderness is because the ambient soundtrack was tuned to frequencies associated with calmness. The composer deliberately used slow-moving string harmonies around 40 to 60 beats per minute, roughly matching the resting rhythm of a heartbeat. It's not just music, it's a lullaby woven into code. Even now, more than a decade later, the world still receives small updates and community additions. Modders have created tens of thousands of new locations, stories, and companions. Some of those creators later went on to work in professional game studios, using Skyrim as their portfolio. The world didn't just inspire exploration, it inspired creation. At the end of the day, what keeps Skyrim alive isn't its dragons or its quests, it's its patience. The game never rushes you, it lets you wander, listen, collect, and breathe. It rewards stillness as much as action. Whether you're climbing a mountain, watching auroras ripple through the night sky, or simply sitting beside a campfire, the world waits quietly beside you, content to exist. Some of Skyrim's best secrets aren't hidden in dungeons or caves. They're tucked into the smallest corners of daily life, the kind of details that make the world feel lived in long after you've turned the game off. Every city has its own invisible heartbeat, and every hill holds a story that never needed words. If you slow down and listen, the game begins to whisper its mysteries. For example, every city in Skyrim uses a unique set of footsteps. The ground in Whiterun has a hollow wooden sound, while Solitude feels firm and echoing like marble. Windhelm's cobblestone steps crunch faintly under the frost, and Riften's boardwalk creaks with every motion. None of these effects are reused. They were built individually to make every city sound distinct even when you close your eyes. The birds you hear at dawn are not random either. Different regions have different species. The gentle calls near Riverwood belong to robins and sparrows. The eerie caws near the Pale belong to crows that only appear during snowstorms. If you climb the throat of the world and wait until morning, you can even hear a faint eagle's cry timed to the sunrise. The sound designers called it the world's first breath. Many players have noticed that when you fast travel long distances, the weather sometimes changes instantly from snow to rain or fog. That's because Skyrim's weather system is truly global. Every zone has its own invisible climate pattern, and when you move from one to another, the atmosphere adjusts to match the terrain. It's like stepping through different moods of the same sky. One of Skyrim's strangest experiments is the way bookshelves work. They aren't just decoration, they're tiny physics simulations. Each book is a real object that slides into place when you store it. That's why sometimes, when you place too many, they tumble like dominoes. Bethesda originally tried to make shelves automatically organize themselves alphabetically, but the feature caused chaos when books began pushing each other off the shelves. The developers eventually laughed and decided imperfection was more realistic. If you follow a courier through the world long enough, you'll notice something surprising. He never truly stops working. Couriers can deliver letters to you from anywhere, even in the middle of a dragon attack. The developers programmed them to track your location constantly, so that when a quest needs to advance, they can find you. They are, in a way, Skyrim's most dedicated employees. No danger, no storm, no blizzard can keep them from their route. The game's horses have personalities too. Some are calmer, while others are more aggressive and will even fight enemies on your behalf. The famous Shadowmere, for instance, is not just stronger, it's programmed to survive fatal falls and attacks that would kill any normal horse. In early versions, Shadowmere was so powerful that players could accidentally launch it hundreds of feet into the air after a glitchy collision. The bug became legendary, and fans began treating the horse as an immortal trickster spirit. Even the smallest critters have secrets. The butterflies that flutter through forests can respawn infinitely if you wait long enough. They are actually programmed as ambient light sources, not creatures, so they subtly brighten the world around them as they move. Moths behave differently. They circle lamps, while fireflies spawn near water and disappear when dawn breaks. Skyrim's night isn't just darkness, it's filled with quiet little lights that exist only for beauty. A subtle but beautiful touch in Skyrim is how the NPCs talk about you after big events. When you slay your first dragon or complete major quests, word spreads. Merchants will greet you differently. Guards will mention your deeds in passing. The entire world remembers your story through gossip rather than dialogue trees. It's one of the reasons Skyrim feels alive. It reacts as if it's genuinely aware of your legend. If you've ever used alchemy, you might have noticed that eating ingredients teaches you their first property. What most players don't realize is that each ingredient has 4 hidden effects. Experimentation is the only way to discover them all. Bethesda borrowed this idea from real chemistry. In early concept notes, the designers compared alchemy to poetic science, where failure is simply part of learning. When you stand near water at night, you might see faint glowing ripples. That glow isn't moonlight, it's bioluminescence, microscopic organisms coded into the game's shaders. They're invisible during the day, but shimmer faintly in the dark. The effect was meant to mimic natural phosphorescence found in real lakes. It's one of those tiny, unnecessary details that make Skyrim feel quietly enchanted. In the base version of Skyrim, chickens were considered sacred. Attacking one in front of townspeople triggered a full-scale hostility response. The developers joked internally that chickens were the true gods of Skyrim. It became such a common accident that players developed entire traditions of protecting their village poultry. Even now, years later, the idea of "don't hit the chicken" has become part of gaming folklore. The reason combat in Skyrim feels heavy isn't just sound design, it's math. The developers tuned the animation timing of swings and blocks to be slightly slower than expected, giving each hit a feeling of weight and consequence. When your sword connects, it lags by a fraction of a second, mimicking how a real strike might hesitate through impact. The result makes every blow feel deliberate rather than frantic. The College of Winterhold hides a fascinating bit of design symmetry. Every staircase in the college turns clockwise, a symbolic reference to the spiral of magic and time. The design was inspired by real medieval towers, where clockwise staircases gave defenders an advantage when fighting right handed attackers. In Skyrim's world, it's just architecture with meaning folded quietly inside. If you ever notice a guard using a torch indoors, that's intentional too. Bethesda gave guards torches with infinite flame as a way to prevent towns from feeling too dark during night patrols. The torches never go out, and their light flickers differently from normal ones. It's one of those strange background decisions that keeps the game visually warm even in cold places. Even Skyrim's food carries small touches of realism. The cheese wheels are modeled after real Scandinavian cheese molds. The bread loaves were sculpted from photographs of baked goods the artists made themselves. And the sweet rolls, the game's most famous snack, were inspired by a dessert the studio's founder used to bake during late-night development sessions. In a way, the sweet roll became the symbol of comfort through chaos. The developers placed random skeletons throughout the wilderness, not as decoration, but as stories. Some show evidence of bandit ambushes, some of unlucky hunters, and others of mysteries never explained. One skeleton near a cliff rests beside a small wooden cup, a quiet suggestion of someone who sat down to rest, never realizing it would be their last moment. Skyrim tells more stories through silence than dialogue. Finally, one of the most haunting details in Skyrim is how the music changes when you stand still. If you stop moving for long enough, the soundtrack begins to soften, fading into near silence. But then, almost like the wind catching its breath, the world begins to hum again. Distant flutes, faint choirs, whispers of strings. It's the sound of the world reminding you that it's still awake. Even when you're resting, Skyrim keeps dreaming. There's a quiet comfort in realizing that Skyrim is not just a world of ruins and quests, but a patchwork of memories woven into code. Every cave, every corner, every flickering candle tells a story that was designed with patience. The more you look, the more the illusion feels real, not because it's perfect, but because it's imperfect in the same way life is. Even the snow in Skyrim has a secret. What looks like random flakes falling from the sky is actually a carefully crafted particle effect with dozens of unique patterns. The snowflakes aren't identical, and they don't fall straight down. Each one drifts slightly to the side, as if caught in the faintest whisper of wind. The developers wanted it to feel unpredictable, so no two storms ever look the same. They even programmed the flakes to melt faster near fire, which means standing beside a torch actually changes how snow lands around you. Skyrim's animals behave with surprising intelligence too. Foxes, for instance, often lead players toward hidden treasure. This wasn't an intentional design choice, it was an accident. Foxes naturally run toward nearby landmarks when they flee, and many of those landmarks happen to be caves and ruins filled with loot. When players discovered this pattern, Bethesda decided to keep it, calling it accidental genius. If you pay attention to blacksmiths, you'll notice that their hammers always hit the exact rhythm of a 3-beat pattern. It's not random tapping, it's synchronized to an invisible tempo that keeps the sound pleasant and consistent. Even more subtle, the clanging shifts slightly depending on the time of day. The tone is brighter at dawn and lower in the evening, as if the air itself grows heavier with night. In the game's earliest version, dragons didn't have bones that collapsed properly. When slain, they would twist and stretch into odd shapes, flinging their skulls across mountains. Bethesda decided to embrace the chaos. They kept the unpredictable physics, but refined the animation. So now, every fallen dragon dissolves differently. Some crumble gracefully. Others spiral dramatically into the wind, It gives each battle a sense of finality, as if the world sighs in relief each time one disappears. The citizens of Skyrim are secretly bound by rules most players never notice. Every person belongs to a faction, even if they're not part of a guild or army. There's a faction for hunters, one for shopkeepers, even one for children. These unseen groups control how NPCs treat one another. That's why bandits will fight guards, but farmers will run from wolves instead of helping. The entire world is organized by invisible loyalty, a web of logic holding civilization together. Even the way light falls in Skyrim has meaning. In cities like Solitude and Markarth, the light tends to come from above, representing power and dominance. In Whiterun and Riften, light spills from the sides, softer and warmer, and in Windhelm, it often shines from below, casting long shadows across the snow. These choices weren't accidental. The lighting team wanted each city to feel like its culture, proud, humble, or haunted. The way NPCs turn their heads is another small miracle. Bethesda created an entire system to simulate eye contact. When you walk near someone, they glance in your direction briefly, then look away to mimic natural shyness. Too much eye contact would feel unsettling. Too little would make them seem unaware. The balance between those two was tested for weeks until it felt human. If you've ever noticed how butterflies sometimes vanish when you fast travel, that's because the game saves memory by clearing non-essential creatures between zones. However, one exception exists: your horse. No matter where you go, the game tracks its location, even when you're hundreds of miles away. In the code, horses are marked as persistent entities, meaning they can't despawn. That's why you can always whistle for your companion and find them patiently waiting. Many of the game's sounds were recorded in unexpected places. The wind heard atop mountains was captured from recordings of storms in Alaska. The river sounds came from real streams in Maryland, near Bethesda's studio, and the eerie dungeon ambience, those soft metallic hums, came from recordings of empty elevator shafts and underground parking garages. The team repurposed real echoes to create fantasy spaces. In early development, the developers created a secret feature to track how long players spent staring at the sky. They used this to test if the environment was immersive enough to make people stop and look. When they noticed that testers often stood still during sunsets or northern lights, they knew the world was working. The auroras were later made brighter and more colorful because of that single statistic. Even your footsteps carry history. The sound of armor clanking was different depending on its material. Heavy armor rings like iron, while light armor muffles the noise slightly with soft leather echoes. When you walk barefoot, the sound of skin against stone changes depending on the floor. Wooden planks creak differently if they're wet, and marble resonates like a low note in a song. The world is musical, even when silent. There's also a strange myth among players that the sound of wolves howling predicts the next in-game weather shift. And while this isn't officially confirmed, there's a kernel of truth. The ambient sound system cycles weather transitions in tandem with certain sound triggers, one of which is wolves. So, in a way, the wolves really do announce the storm before it arrives. Many of Skyrim's animations were performed through motion capture, but the combat finishers were hand animated. The animators said it gave them more control over pacing and weight. Every slow spin, every pause before a final blow was drawn frame by frame. That's why combat feels dramatic without being gory. It's less violence, more choreography, a dance between life and tension. The characters who sing in taverns all use real Nordic instruments sampled from folk performances. The Dragonborn Comes song, sung by bards across the land, was recorded in a single take by a singer who improvised parts of it. The final version kept those imperfections, the small breath, the uneven tone, because it felt human. It's one of the few songs in gaming that sounds alive, precisely because it isn't perfect. Even the game's fast travel system has poetry to it. When you fade to black and the new location loads, the world around you keeps simulating. NPCs move, weather shifts, and time passes. You're not truly teleporting. You're simply skipping the journey while everything else continues as normal. Skyrim never stops breathing. It only lets you catch up to it. And perhaps the most charming detail of all, the world occasionally hums. Not music, not wind, just a low vibration buried in the sound mix. It's faint, but if you pause your movement in a cave or mountain pass and listen, you can hear it. It's the same frequency as the world tone used in meditation recordings. The developers once said it was intentional, a subconscious way to make the player feel calm, even when surrounded by danger. Skyrim is not a place that simply exists. It listens. Every stone, every shadow, every gust of wind feels aware of your presence. The more quietly you move through it, the more it speaks back in whispers of sound and light. That's why people never really finish Skyrim. They just take breaks between conversations. The longer you wander through Skyrim, the more it starts to feel like the world itself has memories. Every sound, every shadow, every flicker of light feels like a trace left behind by something older than you. It's not a world that shouts, it murmurs. If you're patient enough to listen, the land quietly tells you everything it knows. One of the simplest details that makes Skyrim feel real is how the day slowly fades. The sun doesn't just disappear, it melts into the horizon, bleeding gold and red into the mist. As the light shifts, every color in the world changes slightly. The green in the trees dulls, the stone turns blue, even the snow reflects more orange at dusk than at dawn. Bethesda's lighting team designed the sky to have over a dozen transitional tones, so that no two evenings ever look quite the same. When the sun finally sets, the stars appear one by one, like embers rising from the edge of the world. The night sky in Skyrim isn't random either. It uses a real simulated star map that moves with time. The auroras, the glowing ribbons of green and violet, are generated by mathematical patterns that mimic solar activity. They shift according to invisible waves of energy that pass across the world. It's one of the reasons the night sometimes feels alive, like it's breathing in color. If you watch long enough, the auroras even ripple to the same rhythm as the background music. The game quietly synchronizes them, so the sky and sound move together like partners in a dream. Beneath that beauty lies something eerie. The wind in Skyrim is directional. It's not a simple looping sound. When you stand in the mountains, the gusts come from the north. When you descend into forests, they swirl in circles, echoing through the trees. And when you enter a cave, the tone drops, as if the wind itself is holding its breath. It gives every space a personality. The mountains roar, the plains whisper, and the caves hum softly, like the world remembering something. The game's wildlife behaves with similar care. Bears hibernate when snow falls. Deer avoid open roads. Saber cats stalk slower prey by crouching low in the grass. Even rabbits have pathfinding routines that make them freeze for a moment before running. That tiny pause was added late in development, a way to make them seem nervous and alive. The idea was simple. If even the smallest creatures feel real, the whole world feels honest. Many players have noticed that some waterfalls sound louder than others, even when they're the same size. That's not random. The audio designers tuned the volume based on geography. Waterfalls surrounded by cliffs echo louder because the sound bounces between the rocks. In open areas, it's quieter, letting the wind and birds take over. It's an invisible symphony that changes every time you turn your head. Even Skyrim's dungeons hide poetry in their design. The level designers followed an unspoken rule called circle architecture. Nearly every dungeon loops back to its entrance, creating a circular path that prevents you from ever feeling trapped. It's one of those subconscious comforts that players rarely notice but always appreciate. You go in, you fight, you explore, and you return, full circle, like a story told properly. The mines in Skyrim use real sound design techniques to evoke depth. When you enter a tunnel, your footsteps grow softer and your breathing becomes louder. You start to hear tiny cracks of stone shifting above. If you listen carefully, some mines even have faint echoes of dripping water, though there's no visible source. The sound engineers recorded those drips inside a real cave and layered them faintly across underground zones to give the illusion of unseen distance. The rivers are alive too. They aren't static textures. They flow in coded patterns, changing their current speed depending on elevation. When you follow a river from its mountain source to its lake, the water gradually slows, and its sound lowers in pitch. It's a seamless gradient, not something most people ever think about, but a small act of craftsmanship that makes the world feel whole. There's a strange charm to how Skyrim handles mistakes. The world isn't perfect, and that's part of its beauty. When mammoths accidentally float into the air, or giants send you into orbit with a swing of their club, those moments remind you that this is still a dream, a living world built from imagination. The physics quirks have become folklore among players, as iconic as the dragons themselves. Bethesda even called them happy accidents, proof that chaos has its own kind of realism. Inside some inns, you might notice that the candles burn unevenly. That's intentional. The flames flicker in cycles that match the invisible drafts inside the building. Some torches are placed near windows, where the wind animation bends the light just enough to cast moving shadows. Others sit still in corners, creating pools of calm. Light in Skyrim isn't decoration, it's language. Every flicker tells you something about the air around it. One of the most peaceful sights in the game is the way dust floats through abandoned halls. Those drifting particles aren't random either. They appear near sunlight beams and vanish in darkness, following the simulated air currents. They were originally added just for visual depth, but when the team saw how calming they looked, they left them as part of the atmosphere. It's a tiny detail that gives the ruins of Skyrim a strange kind of beauty, decay that feels alive. Many of the game's hidden rooms contain developer signatures. In the corner of one test chamber is a note that reads, "If you're here, you're not supposed to be." Another simply says, "Go touch grass." These notes were left by programmers to amuse anyone who managed to glitch through the map. They serve no purpose but to remind players that behind every illusion of fantasy, there's a smile from the people who built it. Even the dragon's bones tell stories. Their skeletons are made of dozens of individual parts, each designed to fall according to gravity and slope. The tailbones fall slower than the ribs. The wings fold inward before vanishing. Sometimes they settle into perfect poses, and other times they scatter wildly across the rocks. The unpredictability makes their deaths feel organic, like nature reclaiming something ancient. In the wild, you can find tiny shrines that aren't marked on the map. They sit beside rivers or cliffs, holding candles and small statues. They're never tied to quests, never explained. The artists placed them by hand to make travelers feel like the world existed before you arrived and would continue after you left. It's a rare kind of humility in a game, the acknowledgement that you are a guest, not a hero, in this landscape. Even after all these years, players still stumble upon things no one had noticed before. A pattern in the stars that mirrors the map, a skeleton resting beside a dog's bone, a song in a tavern that seems to hum differently depending on the weather. Skyrim keeps secrets not because it needs to, but because it wants to remind you that wonder never ends. The world will always have something left to say if you're quiet enough to listen. There's something about Skyrim that never grows old. The snow, the sky, the silence, they linger in your memory like a half remembered dream. Even when you think you've seen everything, the world finds ways to surprise you. Its smallest details are often its most beautiful ones, the kind that only reveal themselves when you slow down and let the quiet speak first. If you stand in a forest at dawn, you can hear the world waking up. Birds begin to sing in order, not all at once. First come the small chirps near the riverbanks, then the deeper calls from the woods, and finally the high-pitched echoes of hawks circling above. Bethesda's sound designers recorded dozens of individual bird calls and tied them to a simulated clock, so each species sings at a specific hour. It's not random ambience, it's a living rhythm that follows the same pattern every day. The way fog works in Skyrim is quietly poetic. It doesn't just appear and vanish. It creeps in slowly, curling around trees and sliding across the ground like a tide. Underneath the hood, it's actually layers of semi-transparent smoke textures, each one moving at a slightly different speed. That's why fog feels like it's breathing, because it is. The layers pulse in opposite directions, giving the illusion of life within the mist. It's a small trick that makes the morning feel alive, even when the world is still. Inside the game's files, there are dozens of unused weather types, from dust storms to glowing fog. Some were too strange to include, while others didn't fit the tone. One was a shimmering aurora meant to appear only during thunderstorms, making the sky pulse green with lightning. It was removed before release, but can still be triggered through console commands. The developers once described it as a storm that dreams. Every piece of armor in Skyrim has invisible attributes beyond defense. The sound it makes when worn, the way it reflects light, even how much heat it should visually absorb, all of it is tracked quietly in the background. If you stand in bright sunlight, wearing dark steel, your character subtly glows warmer than if they wore light-colored fur. It doesn't affect gameplay, but it affects how lighting interacts with the model, creating tiny shifts in realism that most players never notice. The cities have small patterns that make them feel alive. In Whiterun, smoke rises from the blacksmith's forge only during daylight hours. In Riften, the docks glisten differently when it rains, their reflection deepened by the water shader. In Solitude, banners sway in the wind based on the direction of the in-game weather. And in Windhelm, snow gathers heavier along walls that face north. The game quietly keeps track of wind direction at all times, and everything that moves, cloth, dust, smoke, obeys it. Skyrim's cooking system is simple, but there's hidden depth in its flavor text. Every food item was written with a small, poetic description. Sweet roll isn't just a dessert, it's described as a rich bun covered in delicate icing. Apple pie reads baked golden and fragrant, a memory of home. None of it changes the mechanics, but those small touches make even the simplest meal feel personal. You're not just eating for survival, you're tasting what's left of a forgotten world. The blacksmiths in each town hum differently while they work. Their melodies are randomly selected from a small pool of tunes, but once the game assigns one to a specific smith, it never changes. That's why some blacksmiths seem to have signature songs. It was an accident that became a feature, a way for the world to quietly personalize itself. Even the horses leave their mark. If you look carefully after galloping through shallow water, you can see droplets linger on their flanks before fading away. It's a subtle animation effect added during late testing to make them feel tangible. The same system applies to armor. If you swim through a lake, your armor will appear darker for a few seconds as it dries. It's the kind of small illusion that makes the digital feel natural. Skyrim's wildlife occasionally interacts in ways that seem spontaneous but are secretly choreographed. Wolves howl at dragons not out of fear, but because the developers linked their threat recognition system to aerial predators. It's an elegant illusion, the world acting like it understands hierarchy. When you watch a pack scatter beneath a dragon's shadow, it feels real because the code gives them instinct. Even the game's treasure chests follow unspoken rules. Every chest in Skyrim belongs to a tier, each with its own potential pool of items. Higher tiers are placed in specific angles of light, so that when you find them, they glimmer faintly under torchlight. It's a cinematic trick, not a mechanical one. Bethesda designed the lighting around Discovery. Every glint, every sparkle, every shimmer was meant to guide your curiosity. The reason Skyrim's soundtrack never feels repetitive is because it's built on a randomized layering system. The music fades in and out depending on weather, location, and your movement speed. Some instruments are reserved only for moments of stillness. The soft chimes you sometimes hear while walking through forests appear only when your character hasn't drawn a weapon for several minutes. The world rewards patience with melody. During early testing, players often reported seeing strange shadows in caves that moved without a source. It wasn't supernatural, it was dust particles reacting to torchlight. The flicker of the flame created the illusion of silhouettes dancing against the walls. The developers kept it because it felt mystical. It's one of those unintentional moments of beauty born from technical imperfection. If you stare into the water at night, you'll sometimes see faint streaks of color. These reflections aren't stars, they're distant auroras mirrored on the surface. The engine calculates the sky's position relative to the water's angle, meaning even the reflections shift as the sky changes. That's why lakes glow green during northern lights and shimmer gold at sunrise. The world is constantly watching the sky. Even the way you breathe in Skyrim was handcrafted. When you stand still in the snow, your breath forms small clouds that fade faster in wind and slower in calm air. The pattern was designed using real thermal imaging footage of cold exhalation. It doesn't matter how long you play, every breath looks slightly different. It's a small act of realism that reminds you that even in a frozen world, there's warmth somewhere. Skyrim's charm comes from how it respects your stillness. The world doesn't rush you. It rewards those who wander without purpose, who watch the sky or listen to rivers. The game was never meant to be conquered. It was meant to be experienced like a memory, a place you can always return to, where the mountains never move, the wind never tires, and the light always finds its way back to you. There's a special kind of quiet in Skyrim that doesn't exist anywhere else. It's the silence after snowfall, when even the wind seems to hesitate. The sound fades until all that's left is your breath, your footsteps, and the soft groan of the world turning slowly beneath your feet. In those moments, it's easy to forget you're inside a game. It feels more like a place you've always known, a dream you just keep waking up into. The snow itself behaves differently depending on how you move. When you sprint, the flakes swirl around your legs. When you walk, they drift downward slowly, drawn toward your warmth. The game calculates your motion through invisible air pockets, so the snow reacts as if your presence has weight. It's one of those subtle touches that makes even a quiet stroll through a blizzard feel deeply real. If you ever stand still long enough in the wilderness, you'll hear faint sounds beneath the wind, a whisper of something almost musical. That's because the ambient soundtrack includes hidden tones below human speech frequency, tuned to feel like humming or distant choirs. They were placed there intentionally to give the sense that the land itself is singing. It's not something you consciously notice. It's something you feel in the background of your thoughts. Every waterfall in Skyrim has its own sound file. None of them are reused. Large falls use multiple layered loops, one for the splash, one for the mist, and one for the echo. If you stand behind a waterfall, you'll notice the sound becomes muffled and distant, the same way it does in real life. That effect was achieved using directional filters that simulate how water blocks noise. It's the kind of effort most people never notice, but it shapes the world's calmness in ways that matter. The auroras in Skyrim aren't just decoration, they interact with weather. If you stand under a clear sky, you'll see bright greens and purples. If clouds begin to form, the aurora fades, its colors diluted by the mist. At higher elevations, the hues shift toward blue. It's as if the world is aware of its own beauty and hides it gently when storms approach. Players often stop during these moments without realizing why. The game quietly slows its soundtrack, inviting you to just stand there and look. In Skyrim's forests, the trees aren't perfectly static. They sway to invisible wind currents that vary depending on altitude. Near rivers, the motion is slower and smoother. On mountain slopes, the movement becomes sharper and erratic. Bethesda called this system breathing trees. It was meant to make the world look like it's constantly in motion, even when nothing's happening. The effect gives forests that subtle pulse of life that feels hypnotic when you're half asleep, wandering between the trunks. Even the way shadows work has meaning. The sun in Skyrim moves across the sky on a precise cycle, taking exactly 24 minutes to complete a full rotation for each in-game day. As it moves, shadows grow longer and sharper, changing their angle as the hours pass. It's a detail you might not consciously see, but it keeps your mind anchored in time. You can tell what hour it is just by looking at the direction of your shadow. The world doesn't need clocks. It has light. In the coldest regions, torches flicker more violently. This isn't random. The game's wind simulation interacts with flame intensity, making fire behave as though it's fighting to survive. The light dims and flares, like a living thing gasping for air. The same system causes campfires to crackle louder during snowstorms. Fire becomes a kind of character in Skyrim, loyal, desperate, and always fragile. Many of the caves in Skyrim are modeled after real formations. Artists studied photographs of Icelandic lava tubes and Colorado caverns to mimic the shapes of stalactites and mineral walls. The lighting designers then used soft blue and green filters to make them feel otherworldly but familiar. Some caves even have faint reflections on the wet stone, created by invisible light sources placed just beyond view. It's those tiny touches, the ones you're never meant to notice, that make the world feel infinite. The reason Skyrim's water looks so calm isn't just technology. The game uses a reflection map built to mimic the behavior of lakes rather than oceans. That's why the waves are gentle, rolling softly instead of crashing. The team said they wanted every body of water to feel drinkable, peaceful, rather than intimidating. Even the sound of the shorelines was adjusted to resemble the slow breath of sleep. The wolves you meet across Skyrim actually communicate with one another. If you kill one, the others within a certain radius will change their behavior, either fleeing or circling more aggressively. The howls you hear at night are sometimes genuine signals between packs, not random noise. The world has a quiet logic to it. Even predators follow their own rules of rhythm and response. Skyrim's mountains were sculpted by hand, but their snow caps were generated through a temperature simulation. The game tracks elevation and sunlight to determine where snow should form and melt. That's why some peaks always stay white, while others change seasonally. The system isn't obvious, but it makes the land feel dynamic, a place that remembers its own weather. If you've ever found yourself staring at a fire in Skyrim for too long, That's not just because it looks warm. The flame animations move at a frequency designed to mimic slow breathing. Each flicker and shift happens at around 12 cycles per minute, roughly the same pace as relaxed respiration. The human brain unconsciously mirrors it, slowing your pulse and calming your body. It's not an accident, it's psychology turned into design. The inns across Skyrim each have different room lighting depending on region. Taverns in Whiterun glow golden, while those in Windhelm lean toward blue and gray. The goal was to make warmth visual, to let you see comfort. The sound of the fire crackling, the creak of floorboards, the murmur of distant conversation. It's all designed to slow your heartbeat to resting rhythm. Skyrim is, in a way, a world that wants you to rest. Even the rain behaves like poetry. Each drop that hits your armor or shield creates a faint metallic ping, barely audible beneath the storm. The effect is random, different for every piece of equipment. If you wear fur or leather, the sound becomes a muted patter. The world is quietly personal. It reacts to what you choose to carry. When you walk through the wilderness long enough, you start to feel it, that gentle hum beneath everything. It's not danger, not tension, it's presence. The world knows you're there, and in its own silent way, it's happy about it. Skyrim doesn't just simulate life, it imitates peace. Every mountain, every cave, every distant horizon is there to remind you that stillness is not emptiness. It's the sound of the world remembering how to dream. There's a stillness in Skyrim that feels ancient, like the land remembers everything that's ever happened to it. Every gust of wind, every shift in light seems to echo 1,000 forgotten stories. The more time you spend in this world, the more it feels like you're exploring not just a place, but a memory. Skyrim doesn't ask for attention. It rewards patience. It waits quietly for you to notice the details that make it alive. The world's fog and clouds are more than atmosphere. They're alive in their own way. The developers designed the clouds to move on invisible tracks that cross above the map. They drift from west to east over the course of the day, changing shape as they pass over mountains and valleys. At sunrise, the light shines through them from below, painting them gold and pink. By midday, they turn white and scattered, and at dusk, the sunlight hits them from behind, turning them violet and gray. You can watch the same cloud pass from one city to another if you wait long enough. The sky of Skyrim has its own quiet routine. The torches used by guards and travelers burn for exactly 4 in-game hours before fading. This was meant to create a rhythm where night never feels static. You can sometimes see a guard relighting their torch just before dawn, the new flame casting longer, warmer shadows. It's a small touch, but it gives life to the illusion that people are always tending to the world, even when you're not watching. Every city's blacksmith produces smoke with a slightly different color. The forge in Whiterun burns a soft orange, Riften's is darker, and Markarth's has a pale blue tint caused by Dwemer fuel. The artists didn't need to make that distinction, but they did. It's those kinds of quiet differences that make each place feel unique, as though every town has its own smell and texture in the air. The way snow gathers in Skyrim is another small miracle. It doesn't simply appear on the ground. The game checks each object's surface and calculates whether flakes should stick or slide off. That's why snow rests neatly on fences, rocks, and rooftops, but not on steep cliffs or moving animals. It was one of the most complicated systems Bethesda built for the game, and it still feels magical today. It gives the world a sense of softness. Even ruin feels gentle when covered in white. The lighting in Skyrim's caves and ruins was built with what the developers called emotional contrast. Areas with danger use cold blue light, while safe chambers or resting spots glow warm and golden. The subtle change in color temperature tells your mind whether you're in danger before your eyes consciously realize it. The result is instinctive comfort. You feel safe without knowing why. It's another example of how Skyrim's magic lies in what it makes you feel rather than what it shows. If you find an abandoned cart or campsite along a road, there's almost always a story hidden in it. Bethesda used the term environmental narrative to describe these moments, small vignettes that never appear in quest logs. A bedroll beside a half-eaten apple, a book left open near a candle, a set of footprints leading away from a frozen pond. They're fragments of unseen lives left behind for you to quietly discover. Skyrim never tells you everything, but it trusts you to wonder. The fish in Skyrim behave with real patterns of movement. They swim toward light during the day and gather near the bottom of lakes at night. The ripples they create are tiny physics reactions on the water's surface. They even respond to your shadow, moving away when you block the sunlight above them. It's easy to miss these details while walking past, but if you ever stop to watch, the lakes of Skyrim look like they're truly breathing. The lanterns along the roads use real flame simulation. If the wind grows stronger during a storm, the fire flickers faster. If it rains, the glow dims. In certain conditions, a lantern might even go out completely, leaving the road darker until the next traveler comes along. The idea was to make the world feel shared, as if other people were out there, tending to the same paths you walk. The reason the northern lights shimmer across the sky so naturally is because they were made using waveforms of real music. The game's composer, Jeremy Sewell, provided audio patterns that were converted into color motion, allowing the auroras to pulse gently in time with frequencies from the soundtrack. It's a beautiful secret. The sky itself is singing the music of the world. If you've ever noticed that your character's hands cast shadows differently when holding weapons or magic, that's deliberate. The lighting engine treats held objects as moving light sources, which means even the glow of a spell affects your surroundings in real time. If you hold a torch in one hand and a spell in the other, the colors mix in a way that mimics candlelight and lightning combined. It's subtle, but it makes every moment in a cave or dungeon feel cinematic, even when you're alone. The mannequins in Skyrim's houses have long fascinated players. They sometimes move when you're not looking, adjusting their pose ever so slightly. This isn't haunted behavior, it's an animation reset that keeps their models stable. But the way it happens, combined with the game's quiet ambience, makes them feel almost alive. It's one of Skyrim's most unintentionally eerie effects, a ghostly illusion created by simple coding. If you rest near a campfire in the wilderness, you might hear small pops and shifts in the wood. Those sounds are timed with the flickering light, designed to imitate the way embers expand and cool. Each pop has a randomized pitch, so no two fires sound exactly the same. The audio team built it that way because they wanted the world to sound handcrafted, the opposite of mechanical repetition. The torches you see hanging in keeps and castles sometimes sway slightly, as if moved by an unseen draft. Those motions aren't scripted. They're caused by invisible wind paths built into every interior zone. The designers said it helped tie the inside of the world to the outside, creating a subtle feeling that air always moves through Skyrim, even behind stone walls. It's part of what makes the world feel alive. Even enclosed spaces breathe. Skyrim's snowstorms use a different kind of sound from other weather. Instead of wind howling, you mostly hear low-frequency rumbling, a mix of wind, air pressure, and faint percussion. The developers described it as the voice of the world itself. It's calming but immense, like standing at the edge of something ancient. When the storm fades and silence returns, the stillness feels earned, like the world finally exhaled. The world's design often reflects balance rather than conflict. For every frozen ruin, there's a warm inn nearby. For every dangerous mountain path, there's a quiet meadow waiting at the bottom. It's as if the game was built not around struggle, but recovery. Skyrim never punishes you for stopping, it encourages it. Every pause becomes part of the story. If you wander long enough, you realize that Skyrim isn't trying to impress you. It's simply existing, patiently, beautifully, and endlessly. The forests hum, the lights dance, and the rivers keep whispering the same gentle secrets they've been sharing since the first day the world began. You don't conquer Skyrim, you join it. You become part of its silence, and in that stillness, you find peace. When you walk alone through Skyrim's mountains at night, you start to notice how the silence changes texture. It's not the absence of sound, it's a living, quiet, full of subtle motion. The world never truly sleeps, it only softens its voice. The trees whisper faintly, the rivers murmur low, and sometimes, if you're still enough, you can hear the echo of your own footsteps bouncing off distant cliffs. Skyrim isn't just a place, it's a hum, a soft vibration that feels like memory itself. The sound of footsteps is one of the most overlooked details in the game. Each surface has its own pattern. Snow crunches softly, wood creaks, stone echoes sharply, and wet ground produces a dull, sticky thud. The designers went even further. Footsteps sound slightly different depending on your armor, weight, and speed. Running in steel feels heavier, slower, and louder. Sneaking in cloth makes you nearly silent. It's not just realism, it's rhythm. The game wants you to feel your place in the world through sound. If you stand on a high mountain and shout into the air, your Thuum echoes off the landscape in real time. The echo you hear isn't pre recorded, it's generated by the game's geometry. The larger the valley, the longer it lingers. The higher the cliff, the thinner it becomes. Bethesda built a custom sound engine just for this feature, describing it as a way to make the voice sound like it matters. The world answers when you speak, it listens before it fades. The stars above Skyrim are mapped to actual constellations from the Elder Scrolls lore. Some patterns represent ancient heroes, others forgotten gods, but there's a hidden detail. The stars aren't static. They rotate slowly across the sky, following a 24-minute day cycle, and they shift their color slightly depending on weather. During blizzards, they fade to pale blue. During clear nights, they glow gold. The night sky in Skyrim feels eternal because it moves just enough to stay alive. Even the way rain falls was carefully designed. Each drop interacts with invisible collision layers so that it splashes realistically against armor, shields, and rocks. When you walk under a tree during a storm, the leaves deflect most of it, and the sound becomes muffled. If you linger in a cave entrance, you can hear rain dripping from the roof, a mixture of real water sounds and slowed percussion instruments. The developers said it was meant to sound like time passing. The game's wildlife behaves in ways that are surprisingly emotional. Wolves mourn fallen pack members, stopping briefly before continuing on. Bears scratch at trees marked by other bears, as if reading invisible messages left behind. Hawks circle the same mountain peaks endlessly, following invisible currents of wind. These details exist not for the player's benefit, but for the world's. They remind you that Skyrim lives without you. You're not the center of it, you're a visitor passing through a story that never ends. In the snowy north, the wind has layers. The first layer is deep and constant, like a breath drawn from the mountains. The second layer adds sharp gusts that pass at random intervals. And the third is faint, a whisper pitched so low it's almost a feeling instead of a sound. The team said this third layer was added to make the cold sound colder. You can't quite hear it, but you sense it, the way you sense a storm before it arrives. The ruins scattered across the wilderness follow hidden design rules. Each one points in a deliberate direction: north toward mountains, south toward rivers, west toward the setting sun. The orientation helps create a subconscious sense of navigation. You might not realize it, but those ruins are quietly guiding you through the land, marking paths that existed long before you arrived. It's part of what makes wandering feel natural, even without a map. The torches you carry aren't just sources of light, they're storytellers. The flame's size, flicker, and color all change with altitude. In the mountains, the air is thinner, so the flame burns taller and paler. In caves, it glows shorter and deeper, tinted orange. The developers wanted fire to reflect the world around it, not the other way around. In a way, the torch is your connection to Skyrim's heartbeat, a flickering reminder that warmth still exists in the cold. If you walk through an abandoned house, listen closely to the wooden beams. They creak softly, not on a timer, but as a reaction to simulated temperature changes. The system measures the difference between indoor and outdoor air and randomly triggers subtle wood expansion sounds. It's a quiet miracle. The house itself breathes. Even the ruins remember the weather. The game's rivers are coated with invisible flow lines that control where floating objects drift. Leaves and barrels follow these invisible currents, but they don't move at the same speed. Lighter items float faster near the top, while heavier ones sink slightly and move slower. It's a physics detail so subtle that only those who watch long enough will ever notice it, but it makes the world's water feel alive. Skyrim's music reacts not only to combat or exploration, but to direction. The soundtrack grows softer when you walk east, toward morning, and more somber when you travel west, toward night. This happens because of how the game tracks the sky's brightness and adjusts the volume layers of instruments. It's not just dynamic music, it's emotional architecture. The world sings differently depending on where you're headed. Many of Skyrim's creatures share sound files with unexpected origins. The cry of a dragon is layered with the slowed down call of a whale, combined with thunderclaps and wind recordings. The roar of a bear includes human vocals recorded by one of the designers growling into a microphone. The howl of the ice wraiths came from scraping dry ice against metal. It's an orchestra of texture, built from ordinary materials turned extraordinary. If you spend enough time wandering the wild, you might encounter travelers who hum softly to themselves. These hums are random, short melodies selected from the game's musical scale. Each one is slightly out of tune, intentionally imperfect. The idea was to make the world sound humble, full of people who sing not for performance but for comfort. When you pass by and the humming fades behind you, it feels like a fragment of someone else's piece slipping back into the air. The candles you see in cathedrals and inns have realistic burn rates. Some extinguish over time, their wax melting slowly. Others stay bright, flickering endlessly. The system isn't consistent, and that's part of its beauty. The developers said it was their way of mimicking real life. Not every light lasts forever, but some keep burning anyway. And perhaps the quietest secret of all: when you sleep in Skyrim, the world doesn't stop. NPCs continue their routines, the weather shifts, fires die out, and the wind keeps moving through the mountains. Even in your absence, the world persists. It never truly pauses. It dreams with you. That might be Skyrim's greatest illusion, a world that feels awake even when you close your eyes, a place that never forgets you even when you've left. The snow keeps falling, the stars keep drifting, and somewhere out there, a torch still burns, lighting the path for your next return. The longer you stay in Skyrim, the more it begins to feel like it has a soul, something vast, slow, and patient, humming beneath the snow. It's not loud like other worlds. It doesn't rush to impress you. It waits, And in that waiting, it feels alive. You can wander for hours without a quest, without direction, and somehow it still feels like you're doing something meaningful. That's the quiet power of Skyrim. It lets you exist without demanding anything in return. At sunrise, the first sound you hear isn't the wind or the birds. It's the faint creak of the world stretching awake. The game subtly increases its background ambience as morning light touches the land. The rivers get louder, the trees whisper more often, and the air hums with distant insects. By the time you step outside, the world already feels like it's been awake for hours. It's one of those invisible details that makes each morning in Skyrim feel like the start of something new, even if nothing has changed. If you travel through the plains of Whiterun early in the day, you might notice faint glimmers in the air. Those are dust motes, reflecting sunlight, simulated using particle physics designed to mimic pollen in real forests. The game tracks wind direction and temperature to determine how they move, meaning that even the air itself is alive with motion. You can almost feel it brushing past your face, soft and cool, carrying the faint smell of pine and iron from the forges beyond the walls. The sound of rivers in Skyrim changes with depth. Near waterfalls, they roar with confidence, echoing against rock walls. But down in the valleys, they turn gentle, as if the current has learned to rest. The developers built this by layering real field recordings from streams in Norway and combining them with digitally generated bass frequencies. The result is a sound that feels ancient, the kind of music the earth would make if it could hum to itself. The world's animals add to that rhythm. Birds perch on fences near farms, while hawks trace invisible circles above mountains. Foxes weave through the grass at dawn, their tails brushing against flowers that bend under their weight. Every movement feels choreographed, but it's not. It's procedural behavior mixed with chance. The randomness gives it soul. Sometimes a deer will pause on a hilltop at the perfect moment, the light catching its silhouette, and for a second, you could swear the game knows you're watching. Inside towns, every little noise tells a story. The soft clang of metal in the blacksmith's forge, the faint chatter from inns, the rustle of clothes hung on lines swaying in the wind. Bethesda used directional audio layering to make each sound exist within physical space. If you turn your head, the noise shifts, just like it would in real life. It's why walking through a city in Skyrim feels more like being there than visiting a digital set. Every sound belongs to someone, every motion to a purpose. When snow begins to fall, the game lowers its global reverb, dampening echoes. This makes the world feel muffled, as if wrapped in a blanket. The choice wasn't just artistic, it was psychological. The developers wanted players to feel warmth even in the cold. By softening the sound, they created an illusion of comfort inside the storm. It's part of why wandering through snow feels peaceful instead of lonely. The world's light sources work like an unseen heartbeat. Torches flicker slightly in rhythm with one another, synced by a hidden algorithm. When you walk through a hallway filled with candles, they all brighten and dim in harmony, like breath. It's not something you consciously notice, but it gives every space a quiet pulse. Even in ruins, where no one lives, the candles flicker together, a reminder that some form of life still lingers in forgotten places. The books in Skyrim are full of invisible stories too. Beyond the words printed inside, each one carries metadata about where it came from. A book found in a Dwemer ruin might have dustier textures or broken bindings. One in a noble's home will gleam with gold edges. The differences are tiny but deliberate, meant to give the sense that these books have lived. They've traveled through centuries of hands before ending up in yours. The reason the dragons feel so alive isn't just their design, it's their unpredictability. Each one has a set of instincts: curiosity, caution, aggression, or playfulness. When they circle overhead without attacking, it's because their curiosity level is higher than their hostility. They're studying you. Some dragons even land near you without fighting, letting out a single roar before flying away. It's rare, but it happens. The developers left those chances intentionally low, like lightning, so it always feels special when it strikes. The auroras that dance across the sky have another secret. They subtly brighten snow covered areas, creating what lighting artists call color spill. That's why, during clear nights, snow glows faintly green and purple, even when no torch is nearby. It gives the illusion that the heavens are painting the ground. When the world is silent and the stars are bright, it feels like the universe itself is alive, stretching its light across the frozen peaks. Even the sound of your footsteps changes at night. The reverb levels drop, and echo distance shortens, mimicking how sound behaves in cold air. When you walk through snow after midnight, it sounds crisp and close, almost intimate. It makes you feel smaller in the best way, like you're the only person awake in an endless, sleeping world. In the deepest caves, the air has its own song. Low frequency tones play constantly, but their pitch shifts slightly as you move. This is called acoustic storytelling. The tones are tuned to minor chords, evoking tension, but as you near exits, they slowly resolve into warmer notes. The designers described it as sound leading the heart home. It's why leaving a dark cave always feels like relief, even if you don't know why. Skyrim's night sky also hides a message. If you connect certain constellations, you can trace the shape of a dragon, wings spread wide, tail curved toward the horizon. It's faint and not marked anywhere in the lore, but it's there, a quiet signature from the artists who built the game. They said it was a gift to players who take the time to look up instead of forward. When you stop walking, the game slows down slightly. The wind softens, the soundtrack eases, and distant animal sounds fade. This isn't a trick of the mind, it's intentional. Skyrim reacts to stillness. The developers created a system that recognizes when you're doing nothing and rewards you with calm. It's a way of saying, it's okay to rest. That might be the greatest secret of all. Skyrim isn't built around conquest, it's built around peace. Every quiet path, every flicker of light, every breath of wind exists to remind you that beauty doesn't need to be loud. The world doesn't compete for your attention, it offers it gently, like an old friend sitting beside you by the fire. The game may be about dragons, kingdoms, and destiny, but beneath all that, it's about stillness, about standing at the edge of a frozen lake and realizing that sometimes doing nothing is the most human thing of all. When the music fades and the stars glimmer softly above, Skyrim becomes what it was always meant to be, not a challenge, not a battlefield, but a dream, a place that welcomes silence, a place that remembers warmth, a place that will keep breathing long after you've logged off. So, when you close your eyes tonight, imagine the snow still falling. Imagine the torches still burning, the rivers still flowing, and the stars still moving slowly across the sky. Because somewhere in that quiet world, you're still there, walking through the mist, listening to the wind, part of a story that never really ends. Skyrim isn't just a game you play, it's a feeling that follows you into your dreams. And in that eternal frost, where time moves slower and the world hums softly, you'll always have a place to rest. Even after all this time, Skyrim feels like a world that doesn't end when you leave it. It lingers in your memory like a melody that refuses to fade. You can almost hear the crackle of a distant fire or the whistle of wind through the pines long after you've shut the game down. It's because the world was never built to be conquered. It was built to be remembered. Every mountain, every candle, every tiny breath of snow carries that sense of permanence, that feeling that something beautiful is still happening even when you're not there to see it. At dusk, the air grows heavier and the colors begin to shift. The golden light that blankets the fields fades into soft gray, and shadows stretch long and slow across the stone roads. This isn't just visual design. Skyrim's lighting engine actually tracks the position of the sun and moon separately, allowing the sky to cast two layers of color at once. That's why, just before nightfall, the world glows with both warmth and chill at the same time. It's that moment between moments, the sigh of a world preparing to dream. The night doesn't just bring darkness, it brings its own rhythm. The game lowers ambient volume, softens animal calls, and lets the sound of your footsteps dominate. In towns, lamps flicker on one by one as the invisible clock inside the world ticks forward. Some windows stay dark, suggesting people have gone to sleep, while others remain lit, hinting at quiet stories still unfolding. It's small, it's unspoken, but it's what makes Skyrim feel lived in. The world keeps moving whether you're watching or not. Inside inns, the light from fireplaces grows dimmer as the night deepens. This isn't random either. The flame intensity decreases with in-game time. By early morning, only embers remain, glowing softly in the hearths. When the tavern keeper relights the fire at dawn, the crackle grows bright again, as if the world is waking up with you. The rhythm of day and night becomes a lullaby, quiet, steady, eternal. In the wild, creatures follow similar cycles. Wolves hunt at dusk and disappear by sunrise. Deer sleep near tree lines until morning, where they move slowly through the mist. Owls take the air, their calls echoing through forests with soft, looping distance filters that make them sound like they're everywhere and nowhere. The team who designed this system said they wanted players to feel like nature was whispering around them. It's not a soundscape, it's a language made of wind. If you travel north into the frozen tundra, the air becomes thin, and the horizon stretches into infinity. The snow there is brighter, not because of lighting, but because of reflectivity. The developers used real-world brightness data from ice fields to simulate how snow scatters sunlight. That's why it hurts your eyes a little, even in a game. The world glows too much to be fully tamed. In a sense, Skyrim is reminding you that some beauty is meant to stay cold, distant, and untouched. When the storms come, the world hums. The thunder isn't just noise, it has layers of pitch to suggest depth and distance. The first rumble rolls wide and low, like it's crawling along the earth. The second crack is sharper, closer, more immediate. And just after the storm passes, the wind rises softly, like the world exhaling. Even chaos has rhythm in Skyrim. It's not destruction, it's cleansing, a kind of music older than memory. If you ever find yourself standing on a mountain and staring at the horizon, look long enough and you might notice the faint shimmer of heat in the air, even in the cold. It's a visual illusion created by atmospheric distortion. Bethesda added it so the distance would feel more alive, like air that never stops moving. The shimmer is so subtle that most players never see it, but it's always there, a constant reminder that even the quietest landscapes are full of invisible energy. In the hidden corners of the game, the developers left traces of themselves, a small rock formation shaped like the letters B and S, a fishing boat placed just far enough out to sea that you'll never reach it without cheats, holding a single note that reads, "We were here." These aren't Easter eggs for humor, they're footprints, proof that behind this endless digital wilderness, real people built something they loved enough to hide their names inside it. The game's weather cycles carry a strange poetry too. Rain never lasts more than 8 in-game hours, snowstorms fade in layers, and clear skies always follow after a brief pause. That pause is intentional, a half minute of stillness where nothing happens. It gives your mind a breath between weathers, like the world itself is taking time to appreciate its own beauty before changing again. The fires that burn in forges and campsites share one more secret. Their flickering isn't random. It loops to the beat of the soundtrack's underlying tempo, syncing visually to the score's rhythm. The world's music and its light are connected, one always breathing with the other. When the strings rise in the background, you can sometimes see the flames dancing just a little faster, the entire scene pulsing softly in time. It's an invisible harmony between sight and sound. When the night is clear and the auroras rise, the stars above Skyrim move in slow patterns. If you watch long enough, you'll notice the same constellations return to their positions after exactly 24 in-game hours. It's the rhythm of eternity, the loop of time disguised as sky. That's the secret of Skyrim's peace. Everything moves, but nothing truly ends. The snow melts and returns. The day fades and comes again. The light leaves and always finds its way back. Even the smallest detail, the flick of a torch, the crunch of snow, the flutter of a moth near a lantern, carries that same quiet philosophy. Skyrim was designed not just as a world to explore, but as a world that explores you back. It watches how you move, listens when you stop, and fills the silence with the soft heartbeat of its own existence. That's why it feels so peaceful. It's not trying to entertain you, it's trying to comfort you. And somewhere between those mountains and rivers, between the firelight and the frost, you find a strange sense of belonging. The world feels endless, but never lonely. It's the same feeling as drifting off to sleep beside a fire, knowing the world outside is cold, but you are warm and safe inside it. Skyrim has that same quiet promise. You don't need to fight, or build, or win. You just need to be, to listen, to breathe. So tonight, when you close your eyes, imagine that world still turning, the auroras glowing faintly across the snow, the rivers murmuring softly under ice, and the stars sliding silently above the peaks. Somewhere out there, a guard is still walking his patrol, a fire is still burning in a lonely cabin, and the wind is still singing its old northern song. Skyrim never stops, it only waits, waiting for the next time you wander its roads, step through its fog, and fall in love with its silence all over again.